Cool. How's everyone doing? Good. Well, thanks for coming by. Hopefully, you got a little chance to kind of walk around and soak in the atmosphere. I heard the ensemble, the
Yeah,
Nelly
whoever
ensemble.
was singing
that
harmonies
happened.
was nailing it.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I guess we're gonna start off with a little bit of an intro about what an entertainment law firm is, what entertainment lawyers do. How many of you have ever had to sign a contract before? Okay, all right. Was that how was that? How'd that feel?
How'd that go?
It's a little bit tedious if you have to read everything for sure.
Yeah.
That's the most nerve-wracking part, making sure you
Yeah.
understand everything. I think intimidating because I didn't know what to compare it to. So just being like, I guess.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
going with, I guess they're not taking advantage of me.
Yeah, those are all, everything that you guys have kind of put out here is, the reason we have jobs, right? At the end of the day, because to your point, it's a lot, sometimes it's a lot to read. The language isn't often, it's all English, but it's not set out in a way that's supposed to be easy to comprehend, right? So there's that issue. There is, like you mentioned, the idea of, okay, I don't have a reference point. So if this says, hey, we're gonna take, this much and you're gonna get 15%, you have no idea if that's good, bad, or terrible. Because, and to your point, you're like, well, I hope they're not taking advantage of me. But it's also an industry that has, a long history of that happening. So, all of those things, that's kind of where entertainment lawyers come into play. Our job is to act on behalf of our clients in, whatever field of the entertainment industry that they're in. And usually what we do is we help negotiate. Let me turn this off. We usually help negotiate their contracts, right? So, on the music side, most commonly what that is a recording contract, publishing contract, production contract. If somebody else is like, hey, I want you to feature on one of my songs, something like that, there'll be an agreement there. If you want to put out your own release and you're working with a producer, you're probably going to want to have an agreement with them, because without an agreement, you and that producer are going to own that record 50-50, right? Even though you're going to be the one most of the time who's going to be, putting in the hustle and building your artist brand and spending money for digital marketing and this and all that kind of stuff, right? So all of these are all kind of areas where you need agreements. Pretty much anything that has to do with your rights, right? And we'll get into some of that in more detail, and Laura and Victoria can kind of speak about general broad, we're not going to get into like real specifics, but general kind of broad agreements on the music side, and Victoria on the film and TV side that you might as young artists run into. Yeah, and that's kind of it. I think the other thing I would say is, the music side, probably the biggest thing to remember, if somebody puts an agreement in front of you, find a lawyer, right? Like if you got a manager who's dealt with it before, that's cool. But usually their form of experience, even if experienced managers, they may not be experienced in that side of things. And especially if, what you don't want to do as an artist, if you're about to work with a manager, if that manager wants you to sign a management agreement, get a lawyer for that, right? Because, whether it's a management agreement, a recording agreement, all those things, the agreements that can affect your career for a very, very long time, right? You sign one agreement now, but that agreement could affect the next 7 or 8 years of your career. So you want to get that right, and it's worth it to figure out a way to make it happen. And, it might be some expense, but you're at the end of the day, you're investing in the next, 8 to 10 years, right? If you're cool to spend money on, social media promotion, that's important, but it's also important to make sure that, your business situation is solid for the next little while. Before I pass it off, I think the one thing I just want to mention on the music side is, I think it's also important to remember that, as an artist, you're primarily dealing with two different types of copyright, right? You're dealing with the copyright. Does everybody know what copyright is? Yeah? Okay, cool. So you're dealing with the copyright in the recordings, right, which is your performance. So, that ensemble there was a great example, right? Because was somebody recording that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So that recording of your performance, there's a copyright in your performance, right? And that belongs to you and maybe whoever did the recording, right? But jointly, you've got ownership in the copyright of that performance. Now, there's also a song there, right? None of you wrote that song. I forget who, Nelly and whatever the producers were. Yeah, but I'm saying, like, I don't know who the producers are. Yeah, like Nelly and whoever may have co-wrote that as a producer co-wrote that song, and that's a separate copyright, right? So, you're kind of usually dealing with two distinct copyrights whenever you're dealing with music. Copyright in the song and the copyright in the performance and sometimes it's the same person, but, as we just, with this example right here, it's two different people. I will pass it off to Laura.
Did you guys get our names? Did anyone
Oh,
say
sorry,
what our
we
names
did-
are? Or we're just sitting here randos?
I just assumed everybody knows me, sorry.
He's not joking.
Yeah.
And Victoria.
Yeah.
Nice to
Nice
meet you
to
guys.
Oh, yes.
It is,
Yeah,
Laura.
maybe can we do a little intro this way too? Yeah.
Who are you
that-
guys?
Yeah, talking at you.
I'm Talia, I'm from Ottawa.
Cool.
Oh, nice.
Singer-songwriter.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Hi, I'm Sylphanari, singer-songwriter from Toronto, but I'm based in Brampton.
Okay.
I'm Siobhan, I'm 17, singer-songwriter.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Sakako. I am also a singer-songwriter, performer, social media girl.
Come on.
Does it all.
Nice.
Oh, I'm I'm Susie, and I'm also an artist, photographer. I do a little bit of everything, and work for Honey Jam, and yeah, it's really nice to be here.
Okay.
My name is Aaliyah Guerra, actually from Montreal, but I just moved to Ottawa. Singer, songwriter, guitarist, producer.
Dope.
My name is Ose. I'm a Melody Soul singer-songwriter from Thursday.
Okay.
Alright.
Lots of Bramptonians in the house. Anyone from Scarborough? Have to check all the time. Miro covered so much. Is there anything that you want to know or any questions?
Oh my God, throw out questions.
Yeah.
You don't want us to just talk at you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I want advice.
Advice.
Advice. So when I was 16 years old, I did a song with somebody that I was in high school with, and he was older than me, but I didn't know anything. Like, my parents didn't know the music industry. I wasn't taking it as seriously, where I knew anything about contracts or anything like that. So obviously, I didn't sign one, nothing like that. So obviously, I'm an upcoming artist and everything. This song ended up reaching like past 1 million streams and everything on Spotify and everything else. I didn't get any money from it. Wouldn't like do anything. He produced it. I wrote the song and then like melody it and everything. We recorded it in his house. So what would you recommend on that? Like, or what is your comment on that, or anything that has to do with that little story? Because now he's making like money from it. I know it's not past 1 million. Like it's not, you know what I mean? Like at like Drake's level yet. So he's not making like that much. But I'm 22 now. So should I do something still? I always think about it. That's why. I always think about it. It's his top song on his Spotify thing. I'm singing it. You know, it's not my genre or anything like so. But what's your comment on it, or what would you like recommend?
Should I jump in quickly?
Yeah.
So for the benefit of the people watching later, you guys don't know what's mic up, so questions is amazing, but could you repeat the question? So that when people watch it back, they know what content is.
So you gotta stay back that entire story.
Okay. Okay, so Talia from Ottawa, when she was 16, she was, no, I'm not going to do that. So the question was, or the situation was, there was a collaboration when you were 16 years old with somebody who produced a song, you wrote the song, that person released the song. Did you perform on the song as well?
Like as in
A
like,
singer? Did you sing on the
Yeah,
song?
yeah. Like,
Okay.
it's me, the whole entire song.
Okay.
Yeah. Like full vocal, and he put me as just a feature.
Okay. So she sang the entire song, though listed as a feature. The producer put the song out on every platform. YouTube, Spotify, all the things, and you have not received any compensation. So you wrote all the lyrics and the melody, and you're the performer, and the producer produced and put the music out there.
Yes, and we recorded it in his closet.
And they recorded it in his closet, in his apartment. Okay, and so that's the situation. The question is now, what would one do in that situation?
Should I even act upon it either?
Should Talia act upon it? That was
Now that I'm
6 years ago. Now that she's 22.
Yes, and it's not my genre or anything, but I still think I should maybe get somewhat accounted for it. I don't know. That's what I think, but maybe change my mind.
What was the discussion at the beginning?
Nothing. It was, we're gonna do a song together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I not that I didn't think that it would blow up, but you know, I'm 16 years old. I had no music out at the time. I was just like starting to like get like notice and stuff, and it's like,
Well, let's even look at where streaming platforms were 6 years ago.
Yeah.
that's
Like-
true too.
Probably wasn't even a consideration.
Exactly. Even too, we got a lot of streaming, not only from a lot of YouTube accounts posted it, so a lot of it came from there as well, because it's an EDM track. Everyone is loving EDM. You know, so yeah, and like I've always just thought about it in the back of my head. There was no discussion, you know. Definitely should have been a discussion, but I'll be honest, I didn't know better. I was still in high school. I was like, what, grade 10, grade 11, and he was old. Like he was like grade 12. You know what I mean? So I'm like, oh my God, somebody wants to work with me. They're older, like, you know, I want to do it. I want to do a track. I've done music my whole entire life, you know. So yeah.
Right. Okay. So what can be done?
What can be done? What should be done? Should anything be done?
Should do you want to do anything?
I mean, I feel like I deserve like maybe something, or just maybe even an acknowledgement to like, because even trying to reach out, it was like, you know what I mean, blah blah blah. Even my mom like turned around and was like, maybe we should get a lawyer for this, and I was like, I don't know if I should take it to that far extent, just because it's not like how I said, not trying to discredit him, but like it's not like as big as like a Drake song, like you know what I mean? So is it really worth it, and just like leave it because it happened so long ago?
So I will start by saying, I know that you said it's not your genre, but the money doesn't discriminate. The money doesn't care what genre it comes in through. But outside of that, and we look forward to and welcome all of your questions, but we are unable to provide legal advice in this particular setting. Wink for the camera. But what happens generally is that money is collected by the different royalty collection agencies whenever the song is played, streamed, downloaded, purchased, synced, all of that stuff, right? And so it sounds like it might be worth a conversation. If there was not a conversation that was had at that time, or if maybe you don't remember, if you did have a conversation, or even if you were just excited to be there and you said, I'm gonna do all these things, a lot of times in this business, in my experience, the ball can get rolling with a conversation. Because if you don't talk to the person on the other side, then you just don't know. You're kind of guessing, and you can at least get the temperature of the situation when you're able to make contact with that person. And then based on what you discuss at that time, it will inform what your next steps might be.
If they're not but there's no communication too.
Like he's ignoring you, yeah.
Like I don't know if I'm blocked. Like I can't seem to like find stuff anymore, and like I'm friends with like people who still work with him, and they're like, yeah, he's still around. He's on social media. So I guess clearly it's like I'm not trying to talk to you. You know what I mean? And I did reach out. I'm definitely the type when it comes to stuff. I'm not like the crazy type. I'm like, you know, mature, professional about it. Just because you don't want someone to come back and turn around and be like, well, she was crazy about it. Like, you know what I mean? So like that's why I'm like sitting here like, well, should I? You know what I mean? Because like how am I supposed to communicate with you? Show up to his house? No.
Well, sometimes they
I
do.
I don't want my own like legal action coming towards me. Like.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough in a situation like that because like at around 1 million streams, you're probably, and is that across like YouTube and Spotify and all of that stuff?
Spotify alone is over 1 million.
Okay, so that's a few grand. So because you're still at a point where it's like, you know, is there enough money there to justify paying a lawyer for it, right? One thing you might want to think about is just issuing takedown notices, right? takedown notices. So takedown notice, all of the platforms, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, they have a mechanism where if music is on there that shouldn't be on there, like, if I just went and decided, called myself Little Miro and just started uploading all of Drake's music, under my Spotify account. Thanks. Been working on it for a while. Universal and they could issue a takedown notice for my account, right?
That kind of happened because I do this thing on my IG where I do remixes on my IG. I take somebody's song and I put my own lyrics on it. And
Yeah.
twist it up, make it OSA. And I think I did it for I Hate You by SZA. And then I put it up. Obviously, I can't put it up on Spotify or anything, but I put it up on SoundCloud. And they surprisingly they took it down a couple times. Somehow I still got it to stay there.
Okay.
I think through the this creator function or whatever, but yeah, that
Yeah. So there's
sometimes TikTok needs to snap.
exactly right. So there's some of the labels will just have algorithms on YouTube to take stuff down, but as an individual, you can still, there's a form, right? It's under an American statute called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Yeah, I think that sounds right.
The Digital Millennial Copyright Act. Millennium?
Millennium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Copyright Act.
Yeah, DMCA. So there's under that thing, it's why a YouTube or Spotify aren't legally liable. You can't sue them for infringement, but they have to provide a mechanism for you to be able to report infringing content, and then they have to deal with that, right? So that may be the best way to deal with something like this yourself. And because usually when that happens, they'll notify the person and say, hey, you have to respond to this thing or we'll take it down. And then,
Prove to us that you own it.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and it's a bit wonky because sometimes they'll, to your point about proof, it's so weird because sometimes and it feels completely at random. Sometimes they're very pro whoever filed the thing.
And they'll strike it down and it's
Yeah,
all gone.
and other times they're like,
Just,
oh,
eh.
no, we can't do anything. You have to, so it is a bit all over the place.
I'd say the one thing is, it would get the attention
Yeah.
of the other person that you were working with, that this takedown notice was put up, and if they don't respond properly, it will freeze their video, it can freeze their account. So even, it can be a bit of a bargaining chip to say, in my experience, they'll reach out and say, hey, what are you doing? You froze my account. Yeah, sorry about that. Can we just make sure that the composition is tagged as mine? So the income that's coming through there, because you wrote it, and that can open up the dialogue and say, look, we don't need to take this down. We just need to split the income here.
Exactly, because I'll be honest, I don't want it down. That
Yeah,
was
of
my
course.
first project where it was wow, and it made me feel good. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, it's not even my genre, but it's right now.
Ebony.
Hey, does anyone else have any questions? Just raise your hand if there's any questions that you want to know. When you knew that we were doing an entertainment law session, what did you want to ask? So I want to make sure that those are answered. And then one of the things I would love to happen is if you could share any cautionary tales, any things that you think artists at this level should know. We don't know anything really about the film, TV side,
Yeah.
just little things. And if there's time, I know you can't talk about any of your clients, but there's lots of stories out there, famous people that have been burned. A lot of people have watched the Elvis movie, the lawyer with the manager taking 50% and all the craziness that happens there. So, but first we'll start with what you guys really want to know for your career. So just put up your hands, don't be shy, and project.
We're here for you.
Project, yeah.
Well, great. So my question is, what is the use, or is using an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, better than using a contract, or do they have the same weight?
It is a contract.
Okay, so that,
People are signing it at the bottom. Call it whatever you want.
Not sure. Okay, so both works.
So the question was, is using an MOU or memorandum of understanding better than or the same as using a contract? Oh, I'm just repeating.
Oh, yeah, that was
Yeah.
So like, and not to jump in, so like legally speaking, when we as lawyers look at, we say, okay, give us the paperwork, what do you have? And Miro kind of hit it really well. You want to make sure you have something written down that's clarifying your rights. And also, when I'm approaching things, the money. Where's the money? Is someone giving away rights? Then is compensation coming back to them? That's what we're looking for. Brass tacks, I want to see the names of two parties, their actual names, not stage names. I need to know your legal name. Whole bunch of terms. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to pay you this. You're going to give me that. We're going to do this. And at the bottom, each person is signed. And if you're really fancy, a date on it too, preferably. We can call it a memorandum of understanding. We could call it a deal memo. We could call it a producer agreement. Great. What matters to me as a lawyer, to us as lawyers, what does the document say is going to happen or has happened, and what will happen in the future with your copyright, your music, what have you. Get it down on paper. We can, broadly speaking, what we call it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, and I think the key parts are, what that content is, right? And one of the benefits of having a lawyer do it is you know that everything is in there. Sometimes the parties will try and do an MOU and they will sign it, and we'll get those a lot, right? And you look at it and you're like, okay, this is cool. I had this happen with a client, where they had a big song and there was a sample in it, so they sort of prepped something to get the sample before they'd retained us. And I looked at it, I was like, okay, it's good you had something down, but kind of gets you halfway there. Like there's some. Like you didn't address the musical composition, you addressed like the recording side of it, but not this. So, that's where it's like an MOU that you just kind of set out the terms yourselves and put that down. That's 1,000 times better than nothing.
Yes.
And sometimes, depending on where you are in your career, financially, that may make the most sense to do, right? If you're getting to a point where something's really doing well, you think it's going to do well, right? Because even if you didn't nail it completely and got a lawyer and made sure everything was 100% bulletproof at the start, if you see something there's starting to be some activity on something, you can always go then and say, look, this is what I have. Is this okay? Or does it need improvement or whatever? Because at least then and sometimes you can still catch it and fix it at that time, because the hardest time to do it is when that song is blown up, because then everybody just sees the dollar signs, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when everybody who's involved in it will come out the woodwork and be like, oh, I should, even if they did have a contract, a legit contract, if they're unhappy with what was in there, I should get more, that kind of thing, right? So.
And I saw a good example with a client a couple of years ago. They'd been approached by someone, I want to manage you. I'm so psyched about your career. And the client was so excited. And they said, I've got a management agreement. And I looked through it, and in the industry, there's a standardized kind of standardized terms that we're used to seeing, and a length and whatever. And so what the client gave me was a page and a half, like front and half of a back. So already I know red flag. But then I read it, and it's manager is going to represent artist. All income is going to flow through manager. Sign at the bottom. And I said to the client, I'm like, okay, but at what point do you get paid your income from what you earned? And totally fair, they were so jazzed about this idea of being represented that they just assumed, oh, the money will come back to me. But how much, where, how? And that's where it, like Miro said, you at least want someone who can give you some guideposts. And I think as lawyers, we can scale up and scale down. Like if you have a 360 deal coming in through Universal, for and your whole catalog, the whole bit, yeah, we can work at that level. If it's a new artist, and I've worked with artists through Honey Jam before, and working with your budgets, sometimes it's okay, I work with a bunch of different co-writers. Can you just make me a template, something simple that I can fill in with my co-writers as we go? And we can do that. And then as things get more complicated, scale it up, get more specific, but at least take you through. It'll cost you a bit of money up front, but take you through those, okay, here are the pitfalls. Here's what you need to look out for. Here's how you make sure it's both sides of the copyright are covered. And I know it will save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars later down the line, and also give you more confidence if someone's kind of BSing you a little bit. You're like, wait a minute, no, my lawyer said to look out for this. This isn't right. So, yeah, I think there's a big value there.
I had another question as you guys were speaking. Like, so like, you know, in a contract where like it's actual, there's all those legal things you have to have at the end, like I think the warranties and like indemnification, all those things.
Yeah, we love that stuff.
So I'm just wondering, like, because sometimes like if someone's just making an MOU, which has happened to me in the past, like those standardized parts were not in there. So does that have an impact on like the weight of that agreement if it was brought to trial for whatever reason? If there was an issue, like does that make a difference when the judge is looking at it?
Depends on what the issue is.
Yeah. It's like buying insurance. You know, you can buy different levels of insurance and coverage. So not having the reps and the indemnities means your insurance is not as good as if you had all that stuff in there. But still, again, still better than nothing, right? So yeah, it always comes down to a balance of where you are, how much you want to spend, what is the thing that is it worth spending that much money for in the first place, right? Because sometimes it may not be, depending on what it is, right? So
On the film and TV side, a lot we'll see a term sheet, is what we call it. Still contract, everybody signs at the bottom, but it's just those key terms of, okay, you're a composer. You're going to compose this many minutes. You're going to record it as well. We're going to pay you this many dollars. It's going to be a TV show. We can exploit it wherever we want. And then there's a tricky line at the bottom that says all other terms and conditions of this deal are going to be put into a long form agreement if the movie gets fully financed, if they get all the money to make the movie. And there's that caveat in there. So you're bound by this document that you have now. You know what the main terms are. And if this takes off and we do end up making a show, we're going to enter into a longer contract because the money's there now to pay for it. And that's often a way we get through it. So we call it being bound. The two parties are bound to each other. There's an agreement there that we can rely on. And then if things move to the next level, okay, now we're going to really flesh this out and have all of that reps and warranties, indemnities, all of that kind of stuff in there. So there can be graduated steps to things. But I agree with Miro. It's better than people just saying, well, we had a call, and I remember this is what we agreed to.
Yeah, the terms that you have in the MOU as you describe them, they help you navigate through your relationship when things are going well. The things that you listed that are not in there help you try to figure things out when things are not going so well.
Yeah.
So
that's a very good way of putting it, yeah.
So
She's a really good lawyer.
I just have a really good memory, and I think Miro told me that like a year ago. So
Oh, thanks.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I was gonna write that way, and I was like, no, let me just give credit. Make sure credit's in your agreements too, folks. Anyway, so it's it really depends on what the situation is, and you know, I'm not gonna keep repeating what everybody said. It's better to have what you have than nothing at all.
And if you're engaging a lawyer, this is just my standpoint, but how I approach things with clients. If we're putting together an agreement for you, you're all smart people. You can all read. There's no reason why we can't, in a short amount of time, take you through the agreement and explain what those things mean. I can explain to you what an indemnity clause is, so you're like, oh, I get it, and then never have to worry about it again. I'm a firm believer that if you're signing your name to something, you should understand what's in it.
I have a question. So the shorter form contract that you were talking about, for like movies and stuff, that can then be added to like a longer form one. Is that something that happens outside of movies too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely does happen in music. I most recently have seen it with a label deal. So the label will send over deal points or a deal memo, and it's a lot of what is very similar to what Victoria explained, but in the context of music. I've seen it with an exclusive recording artist agreement with a label, and other a distribution agreement as well, where it's like these are the terms. This is the agreement unless and until a long form agreement is provided or something like that. So like Victoria said, you're still bound by the terms that are in there, and it's the things that you need to know at 30,000 feet to be able to allow you to start doing the work that you need to do to kind of navigate through your agreement, whatever it is.
I was a fly.
Oh. Yeah.
Is there a difference between like a film and like TV contract versus like a music contract?
Mhm.
So like, would there be a difference between like having music in a movie versus like having music just producing your own music? Like, what's the
Yeah, so when you put, so that's kind of a lot of the work that I do. These guys are like hardcore music people. I was a musician one day and then became the film and TV lawyer, but what you're talking about, we call it sync and licensing. You're synchronizing music into a visual context. And it's not just film and TV, it's digital media, it's NFTs, it's live performances, it's, your music is going to be used on some like public art, something. It can be a lot of different things when you're combining your music with a visual element. And it's a type of contract that's called a license. We have licenses all the time. All you guys using Instagram, you've entered into licenses with Meta. And the license is just something that says, okay, for this period of time, you can do this thing, and it's going to cost you X amount of dollars. So I'm sure we've all watched Grey's Anatomy at least once. That's the great example of massive music licensing in television. So they have a music supervisor who's going to all of these artists and their publishers and whatever and saying, okay, we want to use this track by Tegan and Sarah for this episode. Then the lawyers get involved and we have a license. It's going to cost them $2,500. It's going to cost them $15,000. They can use that track in that episode. It has to be synced into the episode by this time, as in put in, and then once it's in the episode, that episode can be shown forever. I personally, I do that work all day, every day. It can be really valuable for musicians, singer-songwriters, people just like yourselves, because it's usually cash up front. And can get your name out there really fast. You hear that song from that TikTok video, like that's huge. That song from Grace, whatever. And it's a pretty streamlined process to do it. There's a pretty distinct way to do it, so it can be really complicated, but it can be really easy as well. And then there's also more kind of standard music agreements if we're looking at films or TV shows, and they have a soundtrack album. That I was working on a show recently that's on HBO, and the music is really important to the producers, so they want to create this soundtrack album and a Spotify playlist and things like that. So I was representing one of the artists, and that was more traditional kind of album agreement. We're going to have this one track. And then there's also composing or writing music specifically for the movie, the TV show. Video games is also really huge right now, and really good money. You get paid by the minute, and it's all these composer agreements. So you're the composer. You're calling yourself an artist, a musician. We're calling you the composer. You're going to write X amount of music. They're going to tell you what they want to write. You're going to work on it together. They're going to pay you this money. So yeah, we do those contracts all the time.
Yeah, and Mira touched on it earlier about the copyright. So 60 seconds, copyright, 30,000 feet. Copyright is a bundle of rights that you can license to someone, or a person or entity, like Victoria just explained, in whole or in part. You can give it to them so that they own it, or you still own it, but you're giving them permission to use it. And so you are able to provide that permission if you are the one who owns it. So you asked about the difference between making music to make music and music to be in film and TV. So if that's something that you are interested in doing with your songs, then when you're working on different collaborations with feature artists or producers and things like that, those are the types of things that you're going to see in the agreement, like who has permission to, sync, move forward with syncs. Do you need to get permission from any of the co-writers, producers, things like that? Because if you have, the exclusive right, although there are other people, collaborators who might have an ownership interest in the composition or in the master recording, but you have the right to proceed with any sync licenses, it means that you don't have to ask them. They still get paid, but it means that you get to make that decision. And so sometimes if there are lots of people who are involved and everybody has a say, it might not be as easy to make that decision because you have to go back around and speak to everybody who is retaining their right to grant that license.
So for instance, I'm working for a graphic artist right now and a novelist, and they are turning their novel into an audiobook. Great. Characters in the audiobook sing during karaoke certain popular songs. So it's on us as the lawyers to go to the publishers and say, okay, here's the project. We need like these many lines of these lyrics, this much of this song, what have you. And one of the songs there, just for the composition, just for the song itself, there are 3 different owners that we have to negotiate with and work that all out to make sure we have all of those rights. So so what Laura was discussing about that idea of you being the one able to find the syncs or put it on an album or whatever, that's called an administration right. It's owned by a bunch of people, but you're the one that's going to do all the stuff with it and take care of it. And then as the fees come in, that's where your split sheet is so important. Public performance, net profits, whatever. You're looking at your split sheet. This much goes to Miro, this much goes to Victoria, this much goes to Laura. And yeah, it can be really lucrative, but if you have that sorted out in your agreements to start, it's a breeze. If you're going after the fact, that's where it can get tricky.
Muddy.
Is a split sheet like something we would make on our own, or is that something that's like in the contract, like line by line?
Depends on the kind of contract. Look at us, we're like, well, that's...
So the true lawyerly answer to every question is it depends. Every single question. So we'll get that out the gate. It depends. There are lots of different ways to to agree on the splits. It depends. You're probably not going to have the splits up front because you might want them to reflect people's contributions. And so it might be something that is a sliding scale when people kind of get into the studio and the creative juices are flowing, and it's like, well, I didn't really contribute as much as I thought, or depending on who owns the song, who owns the master recording, who's going to be responsible for exploiting this. There are lots of different conversations that are going to be had in terms of the splits. Now that being said, it would be better to write it, once you have decided, like, okay, this is it, it would be better to write it on the back of a dirty napkin than to have everybody try to remember what those splits were, because of course everybody who we work with, we want them to be wildly successful and win all of the awards. But when things are not written down and there are lots of collaborators involved and the splits are not as clear, people's memory starts to get a bit hazy. And so the discussions around what the splits are or should be or what I thought I agreed to, it makes those conversations on the back end a lot more challenging.
And I think it's also, because it's 2022, it doesn't have to be a napkin. It could be an email.
It could be a text message.
Yeah.
Love a text.
It could be an Instagram DM.
But I
never delete your text.
You got wings, you're like, and you wipe it on the napkin, here's a pen,
Right.
you wipe it on the sauce, but text, email, like anything in writing.
Because those things form agreements, right? You don't. Not everything has to be signed to be an agreement. But what is tricky about copyright is any assignment of a copyright does need to be signed, right? So even if in an email we agree in an email that, like, you're going to have the right to use my share of the song, that doesn't hold up because it's not signed. But you agreeing on what splits are, that's not an assignment. That's just how you're dividing the thing. I think that does hold up, So at least to Victoria's point, it shows an intention of what was supposed to happen.
And when we say assignment, we mean literally like, I own it now, I'm going to give it to you or let you use it for a while.
Yeah.
And like just to kind of add on that, to like as artists / composers,
Yeah.
would we have to generate the mechanical license that we would give to people and the reproduction rights and
No, in this day and age, no, not
You should
really.
register your rights
Yeah.
with collectives.
Yeah. Yeah. But all of that, like all that mechanical royalty stuff, all happens now at a DSP level. Like, yeah, way back when people were just making physical records, yeah, technically that's what you should have gone and done and people needed to do. But now what happens is your song goes up on the streaming service, it gets the streams, Spotify calculates how much they owe. They just hold on to that money until somebody comes and says, hey, this belongs to me. But what's messed up, this is a new thing that's happening. I don't know how new it is, but I'm seeing it now where, one of the new scams is there's people and companies that will just go out there and claim for songs that they have nothing to do with just because. I've got a client that has like, I don't know, probably a $500 million worth of streams, but they don't have a publishing setup yet. And they've just realized that when you go online, like if both ASCAP and BMI have these searchable databases, right? So you can type in a song, and it'll tell you who the writers are, who the publishing companies are that are claiming from that song, right? So when we go and we type in their song, and there's songs that have 100 million streams, and it's coming up, and there's a publishing company attached to it that has nothing to do with them, right? Like any of the writers. So people are just coming in and putting in claims and taking money, right? So.
And goes to your original point about what could I do with this song? Make sure it's registered properly.
Yeah.
And so those monies that are getting collected passively are going to you properly. And I think for any of you, okay, we have an agreement, or we even just have written down, okay, this is what we're going to do the splits. Somebody send an email to SOCAN. Okay, here's this track. Here's how we're splitting it. So at least on that end, and that serves as a record. Like, look, we've registered with SOCAN, and I own 50%. Yeah, go for it.
Typically, in your experience, what is the percentage split between producers and vocalists, like writers?
Laura, your favorite phrase?
It depends. So the question is, typically in our experience, what is the split between producers and vocalists and writers? Yeah, it depends. It depends. So. Yeah, that is the answer. Is it depends. Yeah.
I mean, I think generically it's 50-50, right? That's become sort of the industry standard. That's not always what it is, but more often than not, if you've got somebody doing lyrics and somebody doing music, it's 50-50. What kind of got lost in that thing was that what used to be lyrics and melody, right? Because sometimes you will write the lyrics and the melody, but you won't do any of the instrumentation. But now these days, that kind of gets lumped into one, and the music, whoever like programs and creates the music gets half. So if you've got two people, it's easy. It gets a little bit more complicated when you've got more.
Yeah, when you have more people, you just want to make sure that when you add it all up, it equals 100.
Yeah, exactly.
That's another huge pitfall. It's like, cool, 115%.
Yeah. Which has happened.
Yeah.
And so especially, if we're doing an album rollout and we get all the paperwork from all the collaborators, I will take out my calculator. It's actually my phone because I don't have a calculator, but take out my calculator app on my phone and go through everything to make sure it equals 100. And there have been some times where it's been 80 and sometimes where it's been 120.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, these are conversations that need to be had.
I think that's another good piece of advice. Like, we're used to it because it's our day-to-day, but don't shy away from these conversations. This is your art, no question. Like, it's precious to you, but to make it successful, it has to be your business as well. And so it can be kind of an icky conversation, but I find, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be icky. I'm gonna dive right in and just be like, hey, we need to talk about this. Kind of uncomfortable. What are we thinking? 50-50 off the bat, unless we go in a closet and I've written something all on my own, and then we'll talk about it, or this one we'll talk about it. Cool, great. Shoot you a text. Hey, remember we agreed 50-50 on everything. Let's go make music. So at least you've gone there.
I think it's easier in the beginning to do
Yeah.
100%.
rather than like years later when it's already big and that's all we'll make it later.
Yeah.
I just want to share a very short anecdote because yesterday I was talking to my videographer. We signed a contract from the beginning because that's just how I operate. I don't do without contracts, otherwise I won't work with the person. That's just in my experience, that's the best thing for me. But anywho, he took kind of long. It said 10 days for the turnaround time. It's been 2 weeks, so I didn't feel like in a weird position going to confront him like, hey, what's going on? Like, you're late. because we have it in writing, it's on the contract, and it was
Yeah.
his contract, and he created it, so he should know. But like, I was like, I don't know, should I do it, should I not? But then I was like, wait a minute. I read through the contract, I was like, okay, yeah, it is 10 days, like, let me, so that actually made things a lot easier than this morning he sent it. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes things a lot easier even if people are trying to like ghost you and stuff.
Yeah, and that's what it's for.
Yeah, that's entirely the point. I mean, the best contract is really one that gets written and it's so tight, you never have to look at it again because everybody knows what we're doing and we're good to go. That's why it's like insurance. You don't realize what the point is until you actually need to rely on it.
In the back.
What type of fees do entertainment lawyers charge?
It depends. Nailed it. Nailed it.
Yeah.
We get paid in blood mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on what it is that you're being asked to do. Like, can you review this 1,000-page contract versus a little one-sheet advice type thing?
Yeah.
Is your hourly rate the same? Is it sort of a package to do this? How does it work?
Can I add on to that as well? And as well, adding on to what she's saying, what would you recommend, like right now, for somebody who may not like be able to afford it? Obviously, we can do the contracts on our own, like you know what I mean. But if that were to ever come about, like right now, in one of our like, not saying that like on anyone's money situation, but like if I don't have it, like what should I do? Like you know, I can't afford to come. You know, sorry to add on to what Ebony said as well.
I think we all have our own.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, maybe we'll each answer this question. So.
We have a billable hour.
Yeah, exactly. We typically work on a hourly rate basis, right? So, you know, X number of dollars per hour, and that ranges at this law firm from 200 and change to 550, kind of thing, depending on who the lawyer is.
And that's based on usually experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
So our newest lawyer there, Miro and Friends,
Yeah.
that part.
So that's sort of that's kind of the default, right? Now, sometimes we do flat fees, right? Sometimes we rarely may do kind of other arrangements as well, but usually it's either sort of like a fixed fee arrangement or an hourly rate arrangement. If you come, if you have something, and I've done situations for like a producer, and people do vary, right? For me, I'm like, I would rather just figure out a way to do this for you in a way that makes somewhat sense for both of us than know that like you can't, that you're not going to get any representation, right? If it's something real, like, I remember I did something like a year ago for some producer, who, like, this 15-year-old kid that got a placement on like a, American Rapper's mixtape. And it was only like, I think he was getting paid like $500, and it was like a regular producer. I was just like, I think I did it for $150 or something like that, which is not, way less than, but it was just more, I would just rather you have somebody kind of done it than not, right? So, here, sometimes we have articling students, sometimes we have summer students, right? There's usually a way to get it done as long as it makes some kind of sense. Like, we're probably not going to just do that if it's like, hey, you know what, I've got an independent project that I want to put out, and I've got 15 people on it, but I only have $200. Can you pay for everything, right? What we might do is say, okay, we can get Victoria's earlier point. We can get you a template agreement where you can do it, and you can fill in the blanks, and you'll have to do all the negotiating and all that stuff. But at least you'll have the framework that you can use, and maybe that'll be $400 or whatever, depending on There's a bit of flexibility. At the same time, we like to.
I think it's really important, especially if you're working on your own projects, to what Miro just said. If you're the one with the impetus in this and you're driving the project, you should be making a budget for your project, even if it's like, I'm doing this on the cheap. Cool. We can do things on the cheap, but legals should be part of your budget.
Yeah.
I tell this to film and TV producers, like, it has to be. And for you guys, it absolutely should be, because that's a foundational part of your project. And you don't know what you're going to run into or whatever. So it doesn't have to, bankrupt you. And it's an open discussion with your lawyer. What's your hourly rate? Can you give me an estimate of what you think this might be? So if one of you guys came to me today with, who cares, whatever it is. I got this offer sync license. How much is it going to cost you to do this? I don't have much money. help. What I would say is send it to me initially so I can take a quick glance at it. Is it 1,000 pages? Is it 1 page? Both of those things would be a red flag. Or is it a standard looking 2 or 3 pages or whatever? I can take a quick look and say, okay, on a glance, this looks quite standard. I can review this for you for 2 hours. Charge you about 2 hours, charge you about an hour. That's still too steep? Okay, how about I bring in one of my juniors? I will supervise them. They're going to do the heavy lifting, and let's work out a price there. That's how I approach things. If it's a larger project and we can't do something for a flat fee, maybe we can break it up into chunks. I can do your template agreements for a flat fee of $1,000. I can do this for whatever amount, and then any negotiations back and forth, because who knows who we're working with, I'm going to bill you hourly, and let's talk about that as it gets started, where we're at. That's how I approach things and tends to make the most sense. But whatever lawyer you're working with, you have a right at any time to ask, where's my account at? How much time have you already spent? Stop, please don't spend any more time. We've gone over my budget. Those are things that, again, icky conversation, but you need to be able to say that to a lawyer.
Absolutely. It's your right, and it's also our professional obligation to provide that to you if you ask. Another situation that you might find yourself in is if you are being offered an exclusive recording artist agreement with a label or another type of agreement with a label. Oftentimes, it's in your best interest and in the label's best interest for you to have your own independent counsel. What does that mean? The label is often going to have a section in the agreement and carve out, a portion of your budget to pay for legal fees. So if you don't have any money and, a major comes to you and says, we want to sign you, we want to give you an exclusive recording artist agreement or a singles agreement or an EP agreement or something, they might have the legal fees paid for you. So you don't have to give us the money up front. You would sign what's called a letter of direction. We would send a bill over to the label, and we do the work, and the money comes directly from the label. Hold that thought. There's a caveat. So that money is not being paid to the lawyer out of the label's goodwill and kind heart. You will ultimately have to pay that back. That will ultimately be recoupable. And so recoupable is essentially money that is given to you up front. We will often call that an advance. And as you are moving through your agreement and making music and exploiting it, releasing it on different DSPs or syncing it and, seeing money come in, the money that is owed to the label from the money that they've given you up front, the legal fees will very likely be included in that bucket of recoupable money. So it helps with your issue, if you have an issue kind of in the immediate future where it's like, I have this agreement and I don't have any money, the label will oftentimes provide the legal fee for that, but just keep in mind that it is recoupable. Is that what you're going to say? I had a feeling. Yeah.
Wouldn't it also be better not to go through the label's lawyers?
So the label's lawyers are acting for the label.
Exactly.
Right, but that doesn't mean that the label cannot provide fees for you to get your own lawyer and pay for that lawyer.
That's just what I want.
And then we have obligations when you come on as our client. Under the Law Society, the rules that we operate under, we can, in that interaction, we are representing your interests. We are advising you. We aren't saying, well, my buddy over at Universal really wants to keep this on the cheap, so how about you work with that? No, we have to do what's in your best interest and carry out your instructions to a point. If you want us to bury a body or something, we can't do that. there's no,
That one does not depend, actually.
there's a part in the bar exam that's like, don't do this. But so even if we're being paid by a third party, and we would have to inform them, a label would know, even if you're underage and we're getting paid by your parents, I'm your lawyer. So if mom and dad were like, oh, we want her to do this deal no matter what, she needs to do this deal, and Siobhan's saying like, this creeps me out, I don't want to do this, I am your lawyer. So X, Y, Z. And we work with people underage too, and that's a discussion we have to have. I've had a 9-year-old on a call and be like, do you want to be on this TV show? Do you understand what that means? So, yeah.
Something also. So for example, for someone who's underage, let's say their parents go into an agreement for them as their guardian,
Yeah.
and now they're turning 18. Can they like change their mind about it? Or is it still gonna be whatever their guardian agreed to at that point?
I mean, it does depend. Like, does the agreement end before the person becomes an age of majority and can make their own decision?
Like, let's say it doesn't end.
Okay.
It runs from when they're 16 to 20 or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, practically speaking, and it's very much the case in the US. This is in my experience in film and television, but it was a music show, and anyways, whatever, kids. Certainly within California, if a child is in an agreement or in a management situation and then no longer wants to be part of it, the courts generally lean on the side of the child. No one's going to force you into doing something. If you sign something at 17 and then change your mind like a day before your birthday, I think we can still lean on the side of this person was a minor, they didn't understand what they were getting into. The word is unconscionable. It's unconscionable to keep them tied to it. Depends on what it is. I can't tell you how hard the other side is going to fight. I can say the younger the child, the more leeway that you have. When it comes to, okay, you were 16 when you signed the agreement and now you've just turned 18. My approach, certainly if I'm representing the child, now the adult, my instructions, I cannot take instructions from the parents anymore. I can't communicate with the parents anymore unless I have instructions from my of age client.
Yeah, and there's in that whole thing, there's if you're underage and your parents have signed a deal for you or however it is, which is not the best way for the parent for that structure to be done, but you as the child, you're entitled to rescind the contract, right? The only thing you can't rescind is a contract where you're getting services. So like if I'm 16 and I sign a deal with Rogers for a phone, right? I can't be like, I don't want to pay you, Rogers, because I'm underage, and keep the phone. Right? Like, if there's an exchange of something you're getting, but for things where, if I've signed an exclusive recording agreement or anything like that, where I'm really not technically getting anything, unless the label can show, no, we've spent X amount of thousands of dollars on you for things that we have not yet received, right? Then you're probably obligated to deliver those things you haven't received. They haven't received yet. And then, it's a bit kind of complicated with rental stuff because on the other side of it, what you're trying to get is some kind of, you can never force the kid to be in the contract. All you can hope to get is some kind of compensation from the parents if the child decides to rescind the contract. Some kind of compensation for the damage, right? So that's kind of the way you structure, which is the other side of the coin that you're talking about.
And where it won't work in the child's favor, more likely it won't work in the child's favor, if they're in one recording contract, they rescind it and then immediately go into another, and they're simply shopping around or whatever, that's gonna be more difficult. Again, same with film and TV and whatever, of, oh, we got a better offer, we're quitting this, we're gonna go do this. That's a little harder. Yeah.
Okay. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Right? I think the industry, there's a lot of great people in this industry, but there's also a lot of shady people in this industry, right? And you know, the one where people start to promise you things like, yo, I can get you with this, you know, I'm gonna get you here, and, you know, I'm gonna get you with Drake, I'll get you with this person, that person, you know, and their entire Instagram is just pictures of them with famous people. Those ones are usually a bit weird, right?
Name dropping's a red flag.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like that isn't. That's not to say obviously there's a lot of people who know a lot of people and move in that way, but also the people who move in that way and that are successful usually don't name drop everybody under the sun. Like if they need something, they'll do it. So I think that's it. It's like if it sounds too good, if people are promising you the moon, because it's just not realistic, you know. Like for anybody, if there was like a real formula for this that people could figure out, you know, it would be more consistent. But even at the major label American level, where you know you've got the best of the best working on this stuff, it's still hit and miss, right? So I think that's it. You know, be realistic. You know, keep working hard, keep doing what you're doing. Look for opportunities and get out there. But you know, don't get sucked into that like, well, that person said he can do this, and I know he can do this kind of thing, right? Because that stuff usually ends up being a bit sketchy.
Yeah. Agreed. A lot of what you will experience in this industry is based on your relationships, but it's important to not let that cloud your ability to do business. So if you have, you know, a really great relationship with somebody and they give you an agreement and it's like, yes, spoke to this person, I've known them for so long, we have a really great rapport, they said ABC, and then you read the agreement and neither A nor B nor C are in there, then it's like, well, what is actually in the four corners of this agreement that I'm signing is going to be what I'm bound to. This outlines my obligations and responsibilities and all of that stuff. So maybe we take a step back, have this conversation, don't shy away from hard conversations. Even if it is somebody you know and trust, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're trying to scam you, but the talk is cheap. If you sign a piece of paper, that's what you're going to be able to look back on and reference to be able to make sure you know that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and that's how you hold somebody accountable if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and referencing you in the anecdote that you shared earlier. And so if it's something that's in writing, you can say, well, actually, look at this, versus you know, relying on the warm and fuzzies of the relationship that you have. And sometimes making sure that things are clear in the agreement will help to foster positive relationships moving forward, because everybody's on the same page.
I think that's exactly my point. My line to clients is, if someone's not willing to write it down and put it on paper, they have no intention of doing it. You get a lot of, okay, we don't need to put that in. You and I know that we've agreed to do this. Maybe they do, and maybe they will, but if they intend to do it anyways, why can't we write it down? I think if you think, ooh, should I ask a lawyer about this? You should have called a lawyer already, probably. And generally speaking, lawyers will certainly talk to you for 10, 15 minutes to say, okay, is there an issue here that you need my assistance on? I know for me, that discussion is free. And then, okay, here's the services I think you need, and then let's talk about how much it'll cost. So don't be scared of picking up the phone or shooting an email to say, hey, I think I might need you. Can we chat for 10, 15 minutes just to figure that out? And then, last, I think just as women in this industry, and generally speaking, there can be a lot of pressure and maybe unconsciously some bullying of, you need to sign this now, trust me. If someone says trust me, I'm immediately like, what are you not telling me? You need to sign this right now. There's not time for you to talk to a lawyer. Don't worry about that language. Trust me, it makes sense. You guys are smarter than that. You can take a minute. My counsel's looking at it. We're going to get back to you. Totally understand the rush, whatever. it's part of having the difficult conversations. It's also being able to kind of stand in yourself and say, yes, I understand that this is of the utmost priority to you. I need to feel comfortable. And I need to understand what I'm doing. There's no reason you don't. And anyone that I've worked with on the other side, worth their salt, they could say, okay, this is the reason for the rush. We need to get this out by 5 days from now. And you say, understood. I will get something back to you in the next 4 days. But especially, like, you guys are very young. That doesn't mean you need to be pressured by other people to do things on their exact schedule. Except for, yeah, no.
We won't get involved
Yeah.
in that. And I know this. We were supposed to say one last thing, and this is two. I'm sorry. But to Victoria's point, if someone's saying, "Oh, don't worry about this. You don't have to talk to your lawyer. You don't have to read this. Go ahead and sign it." A lot of times in agreements, there's a clause at the end, usually in all caps
And bold, yeah.
and bold, where you are essentially saying that you have spoken to a lawyer, and if you haven't, it's because you waived your right to speak to a lawyer. So you want to make sure that you're not feeling pressured to, not have enough time to speak to a lawyer, or find a lawyer who you want to speak to talk to them. Because if you end up signing it, you're essentially saying that, I either waive my right or,
Trust but verify. I do trust you.
Trust but verify.
And I'm going to have my legal counsel take a quick look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Good question.